Section 6 of Steppenwolf by Hermann Hesse. This LibriVox recording is in the public domain. Harry Haller's Records, Part 5. I made up by day for the sleep I had lost at night. After a bath, I went home dead tired. I darkened my bedroom, and as I undressed, I came on the verses in my pocket, but I forgot them again and lay down forthwith. I forgot Maria and Herman and the masked ball and slept the clock round. It was not till I had got up in the evening and was shaving that I remembered that the ball began in an hour and that I had to find a dress shirt. I got myself ready in a very good humor and went out thereafter to have dinner. It was the first masked ball I was to participate in. In earlier days, it is true, I had now and again attended such festivities, and even sometimes found them very entertaining, but I had never danced. I had been a spectator merely. As for the enthusiasm with which others had talked and rejoiced over them in my hearing, it had always struck me as comic. And now the day had come for me, too, to find the occasion one of almost painful suspense. As I had no partner to take, I decided not to go till late. This, too, Herman had counseled me. I had seldom of late been to the Steel Helmet, my former refuge, where the disappointed men sat out their evenings, soaking in their wine and playing at bachelor life. It did not suit the life I had come to lead since. This evening, however, I was drawn to it before I was aware. In the mood between joy and fear that fate and parting imposed on me just now, all the stations and shrines of meditation in my life's pilgrimage caught once more that gleam of pain and beauty that comes from things past. And so, too, had the little tavern, thick with smoke, among whose patrons I had lately been numbered, and whose primitive opiate of a bottle of land wine had lately heartened me enough to spend one more night in my lonely bed, and to endure life for one more day. I had tasted other specifics and stronger stimulus since then, and sipped a sweeter poison. With a smile I entered the ancient hostel. The landlady greeted me, and so, with a nod, did the silent company of habitués. A roast chicken was commended, and soon set before me. The limpid Alsacer sparkled in the thick peasant glass. The clean white wooden tables and the old yellow wainscoting had a friendly look. And while I ate and drank, there came over me that feeling of change and decay, and of farewell celebrations. That sweet and inwardly painful feeling of being a living part of all the scenes and all the things of an earlier life that has never yet been parted from, and from which the time to part has come. The modern man calls this sentimentality. He has lost the love of inanimate objects. He does not even love his most sacred object, his motor car, but is ever hoping to exchange it as soon as he can for a later model. This modern man has energy and ability. He is healthy, cool, and strenuous, a splendid type, and in the next war he will be a miracle of efficiency. But all that was no concern of mine. I was not a modern man, nor an old-fashioned one either. I had escaped time altogether, and went my way with death at my elbow, and death as my resolve. I had no object to sentimentalities. I was glad and thankful to find a trace of anything like a feeling still remaining in my burnt-out heart. So I let my memories of the old tavern and my attachment to the solid wooden chairs and the smell of smoke and wine and the air of use and want and warmth and homeliness that the place had carried me away. There is beauty in farewells and a gentleness in their very tone. The hard seat was dear to me, and so was the peasant glass, and the cool, racy taste of the Alsacer, and my intimacy with all and everything in this room, and the faces of the bent and dreaming drinkers, those disillusioned ones, whose brother I had been for so long. All this was bourgeois sentimentality, lightly seasoned with a touch of the old-fashioned romance of inns, a romance coming from my boyhood when inns and wine and cigars were still forbidden things, strange and wonderful. But no Steppenwolf rose before me baring his teeth to tear my sentiment to pieces. I sat there in peace in the glow of the past, whose setting still shed a faint afterglow. A street seller came in, and I bought a handful of roasted chestnuts. An old dame came in with flowers, and I bought a bunch of violets and presented them to the landlady. It was not till I was about to pay my bill and felt in vain for the pocket of the coat I usually wore that I realized once more that I was in evening dress. The masked ball. And Herman! It was still early enough, however. I could not convince myself to go to the Globe Rooms straight away. I felt, too, as I had in the case of all the pleasures that had lately come my way, a whole array of checks and resistances. I had no inclination to enter the large and crowded and noisy rooms. I had a schoolboy's shyness of the strange atmosphere in the world of pleasure and dancing. As I sauntered along, I passed by a cinema with its dazzling lights and huge colored posters. I went on a few steps, then turned again and went in. There till 11 I could sit quietly and comfortably in the dark. Following the attendant with the pocket light, I stumbled through the curtains into the darkened hall, found a seat, and was suddenly in the middle of the Old Testament. The film was one of those that are nominally not shown for money. Much expense and many refinements are lavished upon them in a more sacred and nobler cause, and at midday even schoolchildren are brought to see them by their religious teachers. This one was the story of Moses and the Israelites in Egypt, with a huge crowd of men, horses, camels, palaces, splendors of the pharaohs, and tribulations of the Jews in the desert. I saw Moses, whose hair recalled portraits of Walt Whitman, a splendidly theatrical Moses, wandering through the desert at the head of the Jews, with a dark and fiery eye and a long staff and the stride of a Wotan. I saw him pray to God at the edge of the Red Sea, and I saw the Red Sea parted to give free passage, a deep road between piled-up mountains of water. The confirmation classes conducted by the clergy to see this religious film could argue without end as to how the film people managed this. I saw the prophet and his awestruck people pass through to the other side, and behind them I saw the war chariots of Pharaoh come into sight, and the Egyptians stop and start on the brink of the sea, and then, when they ventured courageously on, I saw the mountainous waters close over the heads of Pharaoh in all the splendor of his gold trappings, and over all his chariots and all his men, recalling as I saw it Handel's wonderful duet for two basses, in which this event is magnificently sung. I saw Moses further climbing Sinai, a gloomy hero in a gloomy wilderness of rocks, and I looked on as Jehovah, in the midst of storm and thunder and lightning, imparted the 10 Commandments to him, while his worthless people set up the golden calf at the foot of the mountain, and gave themselves over to somewhat roisterous celebrations. I found it so strange and incredible to be looking on at all this, to be seeing the sacred writ with its heroes and its wonders, the source in our childhood of the first dawning suspicion of another world than this, presented for money before a grateful public that sat quietly eating the provisions brought with it from home. A nice little picture indeed, picked up by chance in the huge wholesale clearance of culture in these days. My God, rather than come to such a pass, it would have been better for the Jews and everyone else, let alone the Egyptians, to have perished in those days, and forthwith of a violent and becoming death, instead of this dismal pretense of dying by inches that we go in for today. Yes, indeed. My secret repressions and unconfessed fright in face of the masked ball were by no means lessened by the feelings provoked in me by the cinema. On the contrary, they had grown to uncomfortable proportions, and I had to shake myself and think of Herman before I could go to the Globe rooms and dare to enter. It was late, and the ball had been for a long time in full swing. At once, before I had even taken off my things, I was caught up, shy and sober as I was, in the swirl of the masked throng. I was accosted familiarly. Girls summoned me to the champagne rooms. Clowns slapped me on the back, and I was addressed on all sides as an old friend. I responded to none of it, but fought my way through the crowded rooms to the cloakroom, and when I got my cloakroom ticket I put it in my pocket with great care, reflecting that I might need it before very long when I had had enough of the uproar. Every part of the great building was given over to the festivities. There was dancing in every room and in the basement as well. Corridors and stairs were filled to overflowing with masks and dancing and music and laughter and tumult. Oppressed in the heart, I stole through the throng, from the nigger orchestra to the peasant band, from the large and brilliantly lighted principal room into the passages and on to the stairs, to bars, buffets, and champagne parlors. The walls were mostly hung with wild and cheerful paintings by the latest artists. All the world was there, artists, journalists, professors, businessmen, and, of course, every adherent of pleasure in the town. In one of the orchestras sat Pablo, blowing with enthusiasm in his curved mouthpiece. As soon as he saw me, he sang out a greeting. Pushed hither and thither in the crowd, I found myself in one room after another, upstairs here and downstairs there. A corridor in the basement had been staged as hell by the artists, and there a band of devils played furiously. After a while I began to look for Herman or Maria, and strove time after time to reach the principal room, but either I missed my way or had to meet the current. By midnight I had found no one, and though I had not danced, I was hot and giddy. I threw myself into the nearest chair among utter strangers, and ordered some wine, and came to the conclusion that joining in such rowdy festivals was no part for an old man like me. I drank my glass of wine while I stared at the naked arms and backs of the women, watched the crowd of grotesquely masked figures drifting by, and silently declined the advances of a few girls who wished to sit on my knee or get me to dance. "Old Growler," one called after me, and she was right. I decided to raise my spirits with the wine, but even the wine went against me, and I could scarcely swallow a second glass. And then the feeling crept over me that the Steppenwolf was standing behind me with his tongue out. Nothing pleased me. I was in the wrong place. To be sure, I had come with the best intentions, but this was no place for me to be merry in, and all this loud effervescence of pleasure, the laughter and the whole foolery of it on every side, seemed to me forced and stupid. Thus it was that, at about 1 o'clock, in anger and disillusionment, I steered a course for the cloakroom, to put on my coat again and go. It was surrender and backsliding into my wolfishness, and Herman would scarcely forgive me. But I could not do otherwise. All the way as I squeezed through the throng to the cloakroom, I still kept a careful lookout, in case I might yet see one of my friends, but in vain. Now I stood at the counter. Already the attendant was politely extending his hand for my number. I felt in my waistcoat pocket. The number was no longer there. The devil was in it, if even this failed me. Often enough during my forlorn wanderings through the rooms, and while I sat over my tasteless wine, I had felt in my pocket, fighting back the resolve to go away again. And I had always found the round flat check in its place. And now it was gone. Everything was against me.
"Lost your number?"
came in a shrill voice from a small red and yellow devil at my elbow.
"Here, comrade, you can take mine."
And he held it out to me without more ado. While I mechanically took it and turned it over in my fingers, the brisk little fellow rapidly disappeared. When, however, I examined the pasteboard counter for a number, no number was to be seen. Instead, there was a scribble in a tiny hand. I asked the attendant to wait and went to the nearest light to read it. There, in little crazy letters that were scarcely legible, was scrawled, "Tonight at the Magic Theater. For madmen only. Price of admittance, your mind. Not for everybody. Herman is in hell." As a marionette whose thread the operator has let go for a moment wakes to new life after a brief paralysis of death and coma, and once more plays its lively part, so did I at this jerk of the magic thread throw myself with the elasticity and eagerness of youth into the tumult from which I had just retreated in the listlessness and weariness of elderly years. Never did sinner show more haste to get to hell. A moment before, my patent leather shoes had galled me, the heavily scented air disgusted me, and the heat undone me. Now, on my winged feet, I nimbly one-stepped through every room on the way to hell. The very air had a charm. The warmth embedded me and wafted me on. And so, no less did the riotous music, the intoxication of colors, the perfume of women's shoulders, the clamor of the 100 tongues, the laughter, the rhythm of the dance, and the glances of all the kindled eyes. A Spanish dancing girl flung herself into my arms. "Dance with me." "Can't," said I. "I'm bound for hell, but I'll gladly take a kiss with me." The red mouth beneath the mask met mine, and with the kiss I recognized Maria. I caught her tight in my arms, and like a June rose bloomed her full lips. By this time we were dancing, our lips still joined. Past Pablo we danced, who hung like a lover over his softly wailing instrument. Those lovely animal eyes embraced us with their half-abstracted radiance. But before we had gone 20 steps, the music broke off, and regretfully I let go of Maria. "I'd have loved to have danced with you again," I said, intoxicated with her warmth. "Come with me a step or two, Maria. I'm in love with your beautiful arm. Let me have it a moment longer. But you see, Herman has summoned me. She is in hell."
"I thought so. Farewell, Harry. I won't forget you."
She left me. Left me indeed. Yes, it was autumn. It was fate that had given the summer rose so full and ripe a scent. On I went through the long corridors, luxuriously thronged, and down the stairs to hell. There, on pitch-black walls, shone wicked garish lights, and the orchestra of devils was playing feverishly. On a high stool at the bar there was seated a pretty young fellow without a mask, and an evening dress who scrutinized me with a cursory and mocking glance. Pressed to the wall by the swirl of dancers, about 20 couples were dancing in this very confined space, I examined all the women with eager suspense. Most were still in masks and smiled at me, but none was Hermann. The handsome youth on the high stool glanced mockingly at me. At the next pause, thought I, she will come and summon me. The dance ended, but no one came. I went over to the bar, which was squeezed into a corner of the small and low room, and taking a seat near the young man, ordered a whiskey. While I drank it, I saw his profile. It had a familiar charm, like a picture from long ago, precious for the very dust that had settled on it from the past. Oh, then it flashed through me. It was Herman, the friend of my youth. "Herman," I stammered. She smiled.
"Harry, have you found me?"
It was Herman, barely disguised by the makeup of her hair and a little paint. The stylish collar gave an unfamiliar look to the pallor of her intelligent face. The wide black sleeves of her dress coat and the white cuffs made her hands look curiously small, and the long black trousers gave a curious elegance to her feet in their black and white silk socks. "Is this the costume, Herman, in which you mean to make me fall in love with you?"
"So far," she said, "I've contented myself with turning the heads of the ladies. But now your turn has come. First, let's have a glass of champagne."
So we did, perched on our stools, while the dance went on around us to the lively and fevered strain of the strings. And without Herman appearing to give herself the least trouble, I was very soon in love with her. As she was dressed as a boy, I could not dance with her nor allow myself any tender advances, and while she seemed distant and neutral in her male mask, her looks and words and gestures encircled me with all her feminine charm. Without so much as having touched her, I surrendered to her spell, and the spell itself kept within the part she played. It was the spell of a hermaphrodite, for she talked to me about Herman and about childhood, mine and her own, and about those years of childhood when the capacity for love in its first youth embraces not only both sexes, but all and everything, sensuous and spiritual, and endows all things with a spell of love and a fairy-like ease of transformation, such as in later years comes again only to a chosen few, and to poets, and to them rarely. Throughout she kept up the part of a young man, smoking cigarettes and talking with a spirited ease that often had a little mockery in it, and yet it was all iridescent with the rays of desire and transformed, as it reached my senses, into a charming seduction. How well and thoroughly I thought I knew Herman, and yet what a completely new revelation of herself she opened up to me that night. How gently and inconspicuously she cast the net I longed for around me, and how playfully, and how like a pixie she gave the sweet poison to drink. We sat and talked and drank champagne. We strolled through the rooms and looked about us. We went on voyages of exploration to discover couples whose love-making it amused us to spy upon. She pointed out women whom she recommended me to dance with, and gave me advice as to the methods of attack to be employed with each. We took the floor as rivals, and paid court for a while to the same girl, dancing with her by turns, and both tried to win her heart. And yet it was all only a carnival, only a game between the two of us that caught us more closely together in our own passion. It was all a fairy tale. Everything had a new dimension, a deeper meaning. Everything was fanciful and symbolic. There was one girl of great beauty, but looking tragic and unhappy. Herman danced with her and drew her out. They disappeared to drink champagne together, and she told me afterwards that she had made a conquest of her not as a man but as a woman, with the spell of Lesbos. For my part, the whole building, reverberating everywhere with the sound of dancing, and the whole intoxicated crowd of masks, became by degrees a wild dream of paradise. Flower upon flower wooed me with its scent. I toyed with fruit after fruit. Serpents looked at me from green and leafy shadows with mesmeric eyes. Lotus blossoms luxuriated over black bogs. Enchanted birds sang allurement from the trees. Yet all was a progress to one longed-for goal, the summons of a new yearning for one, and one only. Once I was dancing with a girl I did not know. I had swept her with the ardor of a lover into the giddy swirl of dancers, and while we hung in this unreal world, she suddenly remarked with a laugh,
"One wouldn't know you. You were so dull and flat before."
Then I recognized the girl who had called me Old Growler a few hours before. She thought she had got me now, but with the next dance it was another for whom my ardor glowed. I danced without ceasing for 2 hours or more, every dance, and some even that I had never danced before. Every now and then Herman was near me, and gave a nod and a smile as he disappeared in the throng. An experience fell to my lot this night of the ball that I had never known in all my 50 years, though it is known to every flapper and student, the intoxication of a general festivity, the mysterious merging of the personality in the mass, the mystic union of joy. I had often heard it spoken of. It was known, I knew, to every servant girl. I had often observed the sparkle in the eye of those who told me of it, and I had always treated it with a half-superior, half-envious smile. 100 times in my life I had seen examples of those whom rapture had intoxicated and released from the self, of that smile, that half-crazed absorption of those whose heads have been turned by a common enthusiasm. I had seen it in drunken recruits and sailors, and also in great artists, in the enthusiasm perhaps of a musical festival, and not less in young soldiers going to war. Even in recent days I had marveled at, and loved, and mocked, and envied this gleam and this smile in my friend Pablo when he hung over his saxophone in the blissful intoxication of playing in the orchestra, or when, enraptured and ecstatic, he looked over to the conductor, the drum, or the man with the banjo. It had sometimes occurred to me that such a smile, such a childlike radiance, could be possible only to quite young persons or among those peoples whose customs permitted no marked differences between one individual and another. But today, on this blessed night, I myself, the Steppenwolf, was radiant with this smile. I myself swam in this deep and childlike happiness of a fairy tale. I myself breathed the sweet intoxication of a common dream, and of music and rhythm and wine and women. I, who had in other days so often listened with amusement or dismal superiority to its panegyric in the ballroom chatter of some student. I was myself no longer. My personality was dissolved in the intoxication of the festivity, like salt in water. I danced with this woman or that, but it was not only the one I had in my arms and whose hair brushed my face that belonged to me. All the other women who were dancing in the same room in the same dance and to the same music, and whose radiant faces floated past me like fantastic flowers, belonged to me, and I to them. All of us had a part in one another. And the men, too. I was with them also. They, too, were no strangers to me. Their smile was mine, and mine their wooing, and theirs mine. A new dance, a foxtrot, with the title Yearning, had swept the world that winter. Once we had heard it, we could not have enough of it. We were all soaked in it and intoxicated with it, and everyone hummed the melody whenever it was played. I danced without stop and with any one who came in my way, with quite young girls, with women in their earlier or their latter prime, and with those who had sadly passed them both. And with them all I was enraptured, laughing, happy, radiant. And when Pablo saw me so radiant, me whom he had always looked on as a very lamentable poor devil, his eyes beamed blissfully upon me, and he was so inspired that he got up from his chair and, blowing lustily in his horn, climbed up on it. From this elevation he blew with all his might, while at the same time his whole body, and his instrument with it, swayed to the tune of Yearning. I and my partner kissed our hands to him and sang loudly in response. Ah, thought I, meanwhile let come to me what may, for once at least I too have been happy, radiant, released from myself, a brother of Pablo's, a child. I had lost the sense of time, and I don't know how many hours or moments the intoxication of happiness lasted. I did not observe either that the brighter the festal fire burned, the narrower were the limits within which it was confined. Most people had already left. The corridors were silent and many of the lights out. The stairs were deserted, and in the rooms above one orchestra after another had stopped playing and gone away. It was only in the principal room, and in hell below, that the orgy still raged in a crescendo. Since I could not dance with Herman as a boy, we had only had fleeting encounters in the pauses between the dances, and at last I lost sight of her entirely. And not only sight, but thought. There were no thoughts left. I was lost in the maze and whirl of the dance. Scents and tones and sighs and words stirred me. I was greeted and kindled by strange eyes, encircled by strange faces, borne hither and thither in time to the music, as though by a wave. And then of a sudden I saw, half coming to my senses for a moment, among the last who still kept it up in one of the smaller rooms and filled it to overflowing, the only one in which the music still sounded. Of a sudden I saw a black Pierrette, with face painted white. She was fresh and charming, the only masked figure left in a bewitching apparition that I had never in the whole course of the night seen before. While in everyone else the late hour showed itself in flushed and heated faces, crushed dresses, limp collars, and crumpled ruffs, the black Pierrette stood there fresh and neat with her white face beneath her mask. Her costume had not a crease, and not a hair was out of place. Her ruff and pointed cuffs were untouched. I rushed towards her, put my arms around her, and drew her into the dance. Her perfumed ruff tickled my chin. Her hair brushed my cheek. The young vigor of her body answered my movements as no one else's had done that night, yielding to them with an inward tenderness, and compelling them to new contacts by the play of her allurements. I bent down to kiss her mouth as we danced. Its smile was triumphant and long familiar. Of a sudden I recognized the firm chin, the shoulders, arms, and hands. It was Herman no longer. Herman in a change of dress, fresh, perfumed, powdered. Our lips met passionately. For a moment her whole body to her knees clung in longing and surrender to mine. Then she drew her mouth away and, holding back, fled from me as we danced. When the music broke off, we were still clasped where we stood. All the excited couples round us clapped, stamped, cried out, and urged the exhausted orchestra to play Yearning over again. And now a feeling that it was morning fell upon us all. We saw the ashen light behind the curtains. It warned us of pleasure's approaching end, and gave us symptoms of the weariness to come. Blindly, with bursts of laughter, we flung ourselves desperately into the dance once more, into the music and the light that began to flood the room. Our feet moved in time to the music as though we were possessed, every couple touching, and once more we felt the great wave of bliss break over us. Herman abandoned her triumphant air, her mockery and coolness. She knew that there was no more to do to make me in love with her. I was hers, and her way of dancing, her looks and smiles and kisses, all showed that she gave herself to me. All the women of this fevered night, all that I had danced with, all whom I had kindled or who had kindled me, all whom I had courted, all who had clung to me with longing, all whom I had followed with enraptured eyes, were melted together and had become one, the one whom I held in my arms. On and on went this nuptial dance. Time after time the music flagged. The wind let their instruments fall. The pianist got up from the piano. The first fiddle shook his head. And every time they were won over by the imploring persistence of the last intoxicated dancers, and played once more. They played faster and more wildly. Then at last, as we stood, still entwined and breathless after the last eager dance, the piano was closed with a bang, and our arms fell wearily to our sides, like those of the wind and strings, and the flutist, blinking sleepily, put his flute away in its case. Doors opened, the cold air poured in, attendants appeared with cloaks, and the bar waiter turned off the light. The whole scene vanished eerily away, and the dancers who, a moment ago, had been all on fire, shivered as they put on coats and cloaks, and turned up their collars. Herman was pale but smiling. Slowly she raised her arm and pushed back her hair. As she did so, one arm caught the light, and a faint and indescribably tender shadow ran from her armpit to her hidden breast. And this little trembling line of shadow seemed to me to sum up all the charm and fascination of her body like a smile. We stood looking at one another, the last in the hall, the last in the whole building. Somewhere below I heard a door bang, a glass break, a titter of laughter die away, mixed with the angry, hurried noise of motor cars starting up. And somewhere, at an indeterminable distance and height, I heard a laugh ring out, an extraordinarily clear and merry peal of laughter. Yet, it was eerie and strange. It was a laugh made of crystalline ice, bright and radiant, but cold and inexorable. Where had I heard this laugh before? I could not tell. We stood and looked at one another. For a moment I came to my sober self. I felt a fearful weariness descend upon me. I felt with repugnance how moist and limp my clothing hung round me. I saw my hands emerging red and with swollen veins from my crumpled and wilted cuffs. But all at once the mood passed, banished by a look from Herman. At this look that seemed to come from my own soul, all reality fell away, even the reality of my sensuous love of her. Bewitched, we looked at one another, while my poor little soul looked at me. "You're ready?" asked Herman, and her smile fled away like the shadows on her breast. Far up in unknown space rang out that strange and eerie laughter. I nodded. Oh, yes, I was ready. At this moment, Pablo appeared in the doorway and beamed on us out of his jolly eyes that really were animals' eyes, except that animals' eyes are always serious, while his always laughed, and this laughter turned them into human eyes. He beckoned to us with his usual friendly cordiality. He had put on a gorgeous silk smoking jacket. His limp collar and tired white face had a withered and pallid look above its red facings. But the impression was erased by his radiant black eyes. So was reality erased, for they too had the witchery. We joined him when he beckoned, and in the doorway he said to me in a low voice, "Brother Harry, I invite you to a little entertainment for madmen only, and one price only, your mind. Are you ready?" Again I nodded. The dear fellow gave us each an arm with kind solicitude, Hermann his right, me his left, and conducted us upstairs to a small round room that was lit from the ceiling with a bluish light and nearly empty. There was nothing in it but a small round table and 3 easy chairs, in which we sat ourselves. Where were we? Was I asleep? Was I at home? Was I driving in a car? No, I was sitting in a blue light, in a round room, and a rare atmosphere, in a stratum of reality that had become rarefied in the extreme. Why then was her mind so white? Why was Pablo talking so much? Was it not perhaps I who made him talk, spoke indeed with his voice? Was it not, too, my own soul that contemplated me out of his black eyes like a lost and frightened bird, just as it had out of Hermann's grey ones? Pablo looked at us good-naturedly as ever, and with something ceremonious in his friendliness, and he talked much and long. He whom I had never heard say 2 consecutive sentences, whom no discussion nor thesis could interest, whom I had scarcely credited with a single thought, discoursed now in his good-natured warm voice, fluently and without a fault. "My friends, I have invited you to an entertainment that Harry has long wished for, and of which he has long dreamed. The hour is a little late, and no doubt we are all slightly fatigued. So first we will rest and refresh ourselves a little." From a recess in the wall he took 3 glasses and a quaint little bottle, also a small oriental box inlaid with different colored woods. He filled the 3 glasses from the bottle, and taking 3 long, thin, yellow cigarettes from the box and a box of matches from the pocket of his silk jacket, he gave us a light. And now we all slowly smoked the cigarettes, whose smoke was as thick as incense, leaning back in our chairs and slowly sipping the aromatic liquid, whose strange taste was so utterly unfamiliar. Its effect was immeasurably enlivened and delightful, as though one were filled with gas and had no longer any gravity. Thus we sat peacefully exhaling small puffs and taking little sips at our glasses, while every moment we felt ourselves growing lighter and more serene. From far away came Pablo's warm voice. "It is a pleasure to me, my dear Harry, to have the privilege of being your host in a small way on this occasion. You have often been sorely weary of your life. You were striving, were you not, for escape? You have a longing to forsake this world and its reality and to penetrate to a reality more native to you, to a world beyond time. You know, of course, where this other world lies hidden. It is the world of your own soul that you seek. Only within yourself exists that other reality for which you long. I can give you nothing that has not already its being within yourself. I can throw open to you no picture gallery but your own soul. All I can give you is the opportunity, the impulse, the key. I help you to make your own world visible. That is all." Again he put his hand into the pocket of his gorgeous jacket and drew out a round looking-glass. "Look, it is thus that you have so far seen yourself." He held the little glass before my eyes. A childish verse came to my mind, little glass in the hand, and I saw, though indistinctly and cloudily, the reflection of an uneasy, self-tormented, inwardly laboring and seething being, myself, Harry Haller. And within him again I saw the Steppenwolf, a shy, beautiful, dazed wolf with frightened eyes that smoldered now with anger, now with sadness. This shape of a wolf coursed through the other in ceaseless movement, as a tributary pours its cloudy turmoil into a river. In bitter strife, each tried to devour the other so that his shape might prevail. How unutterably sad was the look this fluid, inchoate figure of the wolf threw from his beautiful, shy eyes.
"There you see yourself,"
Pablo remarked, and put the mirror away in his pocket. I was thankful to close my eyes and take a sip of the elixir.
"And now," said Pablo, "we have our rest. We have had our refreshment and a little talk. If your fatigue has passed off, I will conduct you to my peep show and show you my little theater. Will you come?"
We got up. With a smile, Pablo led. He opened a door and drew a curtain aside, and we found ourselves in the horseshoe-shaped corridor of a theater, and exactly in the middle. On either side, the curving passage led past a large number, indeed, an incredible number, of narrow doors into the boxes.
"This," explained Pablo, "is our theater, and a jolly one it is. I hope you'll find lots to laugh at."
He laughed aloud as he spoke, a short laugh, but it went through me like a shot. It was the same bright and peculiar laugh that I had heard before from below.
"This little theater of mine has as many doors into as many boxes as you please, 10 or 100 or 1,000, and behind each door exactly what you seek awaits you. It is a pretty cabinet of pictures, my dear friend, but it would be quite useless for you to go through it as you are. You would be checked and blinded at every turn by what you are pleased to call your personality. You have no doubt guessed long since that the conquest of time and the escape from reality, or however else it may be that you choose to describe your longing, means simply the wish to be relieved of your so-called personality. That is the prison where you lie. And if you were to enter the theater as you are, you would see everything through the eyes of Harry and the old spectacles of the Steppenwolf. You are therefore requested to lay these spectacles aside, and to be so kind as to leave your highly esteemed personality here in the cloakroom, where you will find it again when you wish. The pleasant dance from which you have just come, the treatise on the Steppenwolf, and the little stimulant that we have only this moment partaken of, may have sufficiently prepared you. You, Harry, after having left behind your valuable personality, will have the left side of the theater at your disposal, Herman the right. Once inside, you can meet each other as you please. Herman will be so kind as to go for a moment behind the curtain. I should like to introduce Harry first." Herman disappeared to the right, past a gigantic mirror that covered the rear wall from floor to vaulted ceiling. "Now, Harry, come along, be as jolly as you can. To make it so and to teach you to laugh is the whole aim in getting up this entertainment. I hope you will make it easy for me. You feel quite well, I trust. Not afraid? That's good. Excellent. You will now, without fear, and with unfeigned pleasure, enter our visionary world. You will introduce yourself to it by means of a trifling suicide, since this is the custom." He took out the pocket mirror again, and held it in front of my face. Again I was confronted by the same indistinct and cloudy reflection, with the wolf's shape encircling it and coursing through it. I knew it too well and disliked it too sincerely for its destruction to cause me any sorrow. "You will now extinguish this superfluous reflection, my dear friend. That is all that is necessary. To do so, it will suffice that you greet it, if your mood permits, with a hearty laugh. You are here in a school of humor. You are to learn to laugh. Now, true humor begins when a man ceases to take himself seriously." I fixed my eyes on the little mirror where the man Harry and the wolf were going through their convulsions. For a moment there was a convulsion deep within me, too, a faint but painful one, like remembrance, or like homesickness, or like remorse. Then the slight oppression gave way to a new feeling like that a man feels when a tooth has been extracted with cocaine, a sense of relief and of letting out a deep breath, and of wonder at the same time that it has not hurt in the least. And this feeling was accompanied by a buoyant exhilaration, and a desire to laugh so irresistible that I was compelled to give way to it. The mournful image in the glass gave a final convulsion and vanished. The glass itself turned gray and charred and opaque, as though it had been burnt. With a laugh, Pablo threw the thing away, and it went rolling down the endless corridor and disappeared. "Well laughed, Harry," cried Pablo. "You will learn to laugh like the immortals yet. You have done with the Steppenwolf at last. It's no good with a razor. Take care that he stays dead. You'll be able to leave the farce of reality behind you directly. At our next meeting we'll drink brotherhood, dear fellow. I never liked you better than I do today, and if you still think it worth your while, we can philosophize together, and argue, and talk about music, and Mozart, and Gluck, and Plato, and Goethe, to your heart's content. You will understand now why it was so impossible before. I wish you good riddance of the Steppenwolf for today at any rate. For naturally your suicide is not a final one. We are in a magic theater, a world of pictures, not realities. See that you pick out beautiful and cheerful ones, and show that you really are not in love with your highly questionable personality any longer. Should you still, however, have a hankering after it, you need only have another look in the mirror that I will now show you. But you know the old proverb, a mirror in the hand is worth two on the wall. Again that laugh, beautiful and frightful. And now there only remains one little ceremony, and quite a jolly one. You have now to cast aside the spectacles of your personality. So come here, and look in a proper looking-glass. It will give you some fun. Laughingly, with a few droll caresses, he turned me about so that I faced the gigantic mirror on the wall. There I saw myself. I saw myself for a brief instant as my usual self, except that I looked unusually good-humored, bright and laughing. But I had scarcely had time to recognize myself before the reflection fell to pieces. A second, a third, a 10th, a 20th figure sprang from it, till the whole gigantic mirror was full of nothing but Harrys or bits of him, each of which I saw only for the instant of recognition. Some of these multitudinous Harrys were as old as I, some older, some very old. Others were young. There were youths, boys, schoolboys, scamps, children, 50-year-olds and 20-year-olds playing leapfrog, 30-year-olds and 5-year-olds, solemn and merry, worthy and comic, well-dressed and unpresentable, and even quite naked, long-haired and hairless. All were I, and all were seen for a flash, recognized and gone. They sprang from each other in all directions, left and right and into the recesses of the mirror, and clean out of it. One, an elegant young fellow, leaped laughing into Pablo's arms, and embraced him, and they went off together. And one who particularly pleased me, a good-looking and charming boy of 16 or 17 years, sprang like lightning into the corridor and began reading the notices on the doors. I went after him and found him in front of a door on which was inscribed, "All girls are yours, 1 quarter in the slot." The dear boy hurled himself forward, made a leap, and, falling headfirst into the slot himself, disappeared behind the door. Pablo, too, had vanished, so apparently had the mirror, and with it all the countless figures. I realized that I was now left to myself and to the theater, and I went with curiosity from door to door, and read on each its alluring invitation. The inscription, "Jolly Hunting, Great Hunt in Automobiles," attracted me. I opened the narrow door and stepped in. I was swept at once into a world of noise and excitement. Motor cars, some of them armored, were run through the streets chasing the pedestrians. They ran them down and either left them mangled on the ground or crushed them to death against the walls of the houses. I saw at once that it was the long-prepared, long-awaited, and long-feared war between men and machines, now at last broken out. On all sides lay dead and decomposing bodies, and on all sides, too, smashed and distorted and half-burnt motor cars. Aeroplanes circled above the frightful confusion and were being fired upon from many roofs and windows with rifles and machine guns. On every wall were wild and magnificently stirring placards, whose giant letters flamed like torches, summoning the nation to side with the men against the machines, to make an end at last of the fat and well-dressed and perfumed plutocrats who used the machines to squeeze the fat from other men's bodies, of them and their huge, fiendishly purring automobiles. Set factories afire at last, make a little room on the crippled earth, depopulate it so that the grass may grow again, and woods, meadows, heather, stream, and moor return to this world of dust and concrete. Other placards, on the other hand, in wonderful colors and magnificently phrased, warned all those who had a stake in the country and some share of prudence, in more moderate and less childish terms which testified to the remarkable cleverness and intellect of those who had composed them, against the rising tide of anarchy. They depicted, in a truly impressive way, the blessings of order and work and property and education and justice,
and praised machinery as the last and most sublime invention of the human mind. With its aid, men would be equal to the gods. I studied these placards, both the red and the green, and reflected on them and marveled at them. The flaming eloquence affected me as powerfully as the compelling logic. They were right, and I stood as deeply convinced in front of one as in front of the other, a good deal disturbed all the time by the rather juicy firing that went on all round me. Well, the principal thing was clear. There was a war on, a violent, genuine, and highly sympathetic war, where there was no concern for Kaiser or Republic, for frontiers, flags or colors, and other equally decorative and theatrical matters, all nonsense at bottom, but a war in which everyone who lacked air to breathe and no longer found life exactly pleasing gave emphatic expression to his displeasure and strove to prepare the way for a general destruction of this iron-cast civilization of ours. In every eye I saw the unconcealed spark of destruction and murder, and in mine, too, these wild red roses bloomed as rank and high, and sparkled as brightly. I joined the battle joyfully. The best of all, however, was that my school friend Gustav turned up close beside me. I had lost sight of him for dozens of years, the wildest, strongest, most eager and venturesome of the friends of my childhood. I laughed in my heart as I saw him beckon me with his bright blue eyes. He beckoned, and at once I followed him joyfully. "Good Lord, Gustav," I cried happily. "Fancy seeing you again. Whatever has become of you?" "Keep quiet with your questions and chatter. I'm a professor of theology, if you want to know. But the Lord be praised there's no occasion for theology now, my boy. It's war. Come on!" He shot the driver of a small car that came snorting towards us, and leaping into it as nimbly as a monkey, brought it to a standstill for me to get in. Then we drove like the devil between bullets and crashed cars out of town and suburbs. "Are you on the side of the manufacturers?" I asked my friend. "Oh, Lord, that's a matter of taste, so we can leave it out of account. Though now you mention it, I rather think we might take the other side, since at bottom it's all the same, of course. I'm a theologian, and my professor Luther took the side of the princes and plutocrats against the peasants. So now we'll establish the balance a little. This rotten car, I hope she'll hold out another mile or two." Swift as the wind, that child of heaven, we rattled on, and reached a green and peaceful countryside many miles distant. We traversed a wide plain and then slowly climbed into the mountains. Here we made a halt on a smooth and glistening road that led in bold curves between the steep wall of rock and the low retaining wall. Far below shone the blue surface of a lake. "Lovely view," said I. "Very pretty. We'll call it the Axel Way. A good many axles of one sort or another are going to crash here, Harry, my boy, so watch out." A tall pine grew by the roadside, and among the tall branches we saw something like a little hut made of boards to serve as an outlook and point of vantage. Gustav smiled with a knowing twinkle in his blue eyes. We hurried out of the car, climbed up the trunk, and, breathing hard, concealed ourselves in the outlook post, which pleased us much. We found rifles and revolvers there and boxes of ammunition. We had scarcely cooled down when we heard the hoarse, imperious hoot of a large touring car from the next bend of the road. It came purring at top speed up the smooth road. Our rifles were ready in our hands. The excitement was intense. "Aim at the chauffeur," commanded Gustav quickly, just as the heavy car went by beneath us. I aimed, and fired at the chauffeur in his blue cap. The man fell in a heap. The car careened on, charged the cliff face, rebounded, attacked the lower wall furiously with all its unwieldy weight like a great bumblebee, and, tumbling over, crashed with a brief and distant report into the depths below. "Got him!" Gustav laughed. "My turn next." Another came as he spoke. There were 3 of 4 occupants packed in the back seat. From the head of a woman a bright blue veil streamed out behind. It filled me with genuine remorse. Who could say how pretty a face it might adorn? Good God! Though we did play the brigand, we might at least emulate the illustrious and spare pretty woman. Gustav, however, had already fired. The driver shuddered and collapsed. The car leaped against the perpendicular cliff, fell back and overturned, wheels uppermost. Its engine was still running and the wheels turned absurdly in the air. But suddenly, with a frightful explosion, it burst into flames. "A Ford," said Gustav. "We must get down and clear the road." We climbed down and watched the burning heap. It soon burnt out. Meanwhile, we made levers of green wood and hoisted it to the side of the road and over the wall into the abyss, where for a long time it went crashing through the undergrowth. 2 of the dead bodies had fallen out as we turned the car over and lay on the road with their clothing partly burnt. One wore a pretty good coat. I searched the pockets to see who he was. A leather case came to hand with some cards in it. I took one and read, "Tat toam assi." "Very witty," said Gustav. "Though, as a matter of fact, it is all one what our victims are called. They're poor devils just as we are. Their names don't matter. This world is done for, and so are we. The least painful solution would be to hold it under water for 10 minutes. Now to work." We threw the bodies after the car. Already another one was tooting. We shot it down with a volley where we stood. It made a drunken swerve and reeled on for a stretch, then turned over and lay gasping. One passenger was still sitting inside, but a pretty young girl got out uninjured, though she was white and trembling violently. We greeted her politely and offered our assistance. She was too much shaken to speak and stared at us for a while, quite dazed. "Well, first let's look after the old boy," said Gustav, and turned to the occupant of the car, who still clung to his seat behind the chauffeur. He was a gentleman with short gray hair. His intelligent, clear gray eyes were open, but he seemed to be seriously hurt. At least, blood flowed from his mouth, and he held his neck askew and rigid. "Allow me to introduce myself. My name is Gustav. We have taken the liberty of shooting your chauffeur. May we inquire whom we have the honor to address?" The old man looked at us coolly and sadly out of his small gray eyes. "I am the Attorney General Loring," he said slowly. "You have not only killed my poor chauffeur, but me too, I fancy. Why did you shoot on us?" "For exceeding the speed limit." "We were not traveling at more than normal speed." "What was normal yesterday is no longer normal today, Mr. Attorney General. We are of the opinion that whatever speed a motor car travels is too fast. We are destroying all motor cars and all other machines also." "Your rifles, too?" "Their turn will come. Granted, we have the time. Presumably by tomorrow or the day after we shall all be done for. You know, of course, that this part of the world was shockingly overpopulated. Well, now we are going to let in a little air." "Are you shooting everyone without distinction?" "Certainly. In many cases it may no doubt be a pity. I'm sorry, for example, about this charming young lady. Your daughter, I presume?" "No, she is my stenographer." "So much the better. And now will you please get out, or let us carry you out, as the car is to be destroyed." "I prefer to be destroyed with it." "As you wish, but allow me to ask you one more question. You are a public prosecutor. I never could understand how a man could be a public prosecutor. You make your living by bringing other men, poor devils mostly, to trial and passing sentence on them. Isn't that so?" "It is. I do my duty. It was my office, exactly as it is the office of the hangman, to hang those whom I condemn to death. You too have assumed a like office. You kill people also." "Quite true. Only we do not kill from duty, but pleasure, or much more, rather, from displeasure and despair of the world. For this reason we find a certain amusement in killing people. Has it never amused you?" "You bore me. Be so kind as to do your work, since the conception of duty is unknown to you." He was silent and made a movement of his lips as though to spit. Only a little blood came, however, and clung to his chin. "One moment," said Gustav politely. "The conception of duty is certainly unknown to me. Now, formerly I had a great deal of official concern with it. I was a professor of theology. Besides that, I was a soldier and went through the war. What seemed to me to be duty and what the authorities and my superior officers from time to time enjoined upon me was not by any means good. I would rather have done the opposite. But granting that the conception of duty is no longer known to me, I still know the conception of guilt. Perhaps they are the same thing. And so far as a mother bore me, I am guilty. I am condemned to live. I am obliged to belong to a state, to serve as a soldier, to kill and to pay taxes for armaments.
And now at this moment the guilt of life has brought me once more to the necessity of killing people as it did in the war. And this time I have no repugnance. I am resigned to the guilt. I have no objection to this stupid, congested world going to bits. I am glad to help, and glad to perish with it." The public prosecutor made an effort to smile a little with his lips on which the blood had coagulated. He did not succeed very well, though the good intention was manifest. "Good," said he. "So we are colleagues. Well, as such, please do your duty." The pretty girl had meanwhile sat down by the side of the road and fainted. At this moment there was again the tooting of a car coming down the road at full speed. We drew the girl a little to one side and, standing close against the cliff, let the approaching car run into the ruins of the other. The brakes were applied violently, and the car reared up in the air. It came to a standstill undamaged. We seized our rifles and quickly had the newcomers covered. "Get out!" commanded Gustav. "Hands up!" 3 men got out of the car and obediently held up their hands. "Is any one of you a doctor?" Gustav asked. They shook their heads. "Then be so good as to remove this gentleman. He is seriously hurt. Take him in your car to the nearest town. Forward, and get on with it." The old gentleman was soon lying in the other car. Gustav gave the word, and off they went. The stenographer meanwhile had come to herself and had been watching these proceedings. I was glad we had made so fair a prize. "Madam," said Gustav, "you have lost your employer. I hope you are not bound to the old gentleman by other ties. You are now in my service, so be our good comrade. So much for that. And now time presses. It will be uncomfortable here before long. Can you climb, madam? Yes? Then go ahead, and we'll help you up between us." We all climbed up to our hut in the tree as fast as we could. The lady did not feel very well up there, but we gave her some brandy, and she was soon so much recovered that she was able to admire the wonderful view over lake and mountains, and to tell us also that her name was Dora. Immediately after this there was another car below us. It steered carefully past the overturned one without stopping and then gathered speed. "Poltroon!" laughed Gustav and shot the driver. The car zigzagged, and dashing into the wall, stove it in, and hung suspended over the abyss. "Dora," I said, "can you use firearms?" She could not, but we taught her how to load. She was clumsy at first, and hurt her finger and cried and wanted court plaster. But Gustav told her it was war, and that she must show her courage. Then it went better. "But what's going to become of us?" she asked. "Don't know," said Gustav. "My friend Harry is fond of pretty girls. He'll look after you." "But the police and the soldiers will come and kill us." "There aren't any police and such like any more. We can choose, Dora. Either we stay quietly up here and shoot down every car that tries to pass, or else we can take a car and drive off in it and let others shoot at us. It's all the same which side we take. I'm for staying here." And now there was the loud tooting of another car beneath us. It was soon accounted for and lay there wheels uppermost. Gustav smiled. "Yes, there are indeed too many men in the world. In earlier days it wasn't so noticeable, but now that everyone wants air to breathe and a car to drive as well, one does notice it. Of course, what we are doing isn't rational. It's childishness, just as war is childishness on a gigantic scale. In time, mankind will learn to keep its numbers in check by rational means. Meanwhile, we are meeting an intolerable situation in a rather irrational way. However, the principle's correct. We eliminate." "Yes," said I. "What we are doing is probably mad, and probably it is good and necessary all the same. It is not a good thing when man overstrains his reason and tries to reduce to rational order matters that are not susceptible of rational treatment. Then there arise ideals such as these of the Americans or of the Bolsheviks. Both are extraordinarily rational, and both lead to a frightful oppression and impoverishment of life, because they simplify it so crudely. The likeness of man, once a high ideal, is in process of becoming a machine-made article. It is for madmen like us, perhaps, to ennoble it again." With a laugh, Gustav replied, "You talk like a book, my boy. It is a pleasure and a privilege to drink at such a fount of wisdom, and perhaps there is even something in what you say. But now kindly reload your piece. You are rather too dreamy for my taste. Any moment may bring a few buck, and we cannot kill them with philosophy. We must have ball in our barrels." A car came and was dropped at once. The road was blocked.
A survivor, a stout, red-faced man, gesticulated wildly over the ruins. Then he stared up and down, and, discovering our hiding place, came for us, bellowing and shooting up at us with a revolver. "Get off with you, or I'll shoot!" Gustav shouted down. The man took aim at him and fired again. Then we shot him. After this, 2 more came and were bagged. Then the road was silent and deserted. Apparently the news had got about that it was dangerous. We had time to enjoy the beauty of the view. On the far side of the lake a small town lay in the valley. Smoke rose from it, and soon we saw fire leaping from roof to roof. Shooting could be heard. Dora cried a little, and I stroked her wet cheeks. "Have we all got to die, then?" she asked. There was no reply. Meanwhile, a man on foot went past below. He saw the smashed-up motor cars and began nosing round them. Leaning over into one of them, he pulled out a gay parasol, a lady's handbag, and a bottle of wine. Then he sat down contentedly on the walk, took a drink from the bottle, and ate something wrapped in tinfoil out of the handbag. After emptying the bottle, he went on, well pleased, with the parasol clasped under his arm. And I said to Gustav, "Could you find it in you to shoot at this good fellow and make a hole in his head? God knows I couldn't." "You're not asked to," my friend growled. But he did not feel very comfortable either. We had no sooner caught sight of a man whose behavior was harmless and peaceable and childlike, and who was still in a state of innocence, than all our praiseworthy and most necessary activities became stupid and repulsive. Pah! All that blood. We were ashamed of ourselves. But in the war there must have been generals even who felt the same. "Don't let us stay here any longer," Dora implored. "Let's go down. We are sure to find something to eat in the cars. Aren't you hungry, you Bolsheviks?" Down in the burning town the bells began to peal with a wild terror. We set ourselves to climb down. As I helped Dora to climb over the breastwork, I kissed her knee. She laughed aloud, and then the planks gave way, and we both fell into vacancy. End of section 6.